All right, Mr. Williams, why are we starting with eagles in the city?
Because the city is something that doesn't really exist worldwide up until the Industrial Revolution. And after the Industrial Revolution, there are cities everywhere.
All right. So as Mr. Williams had just mentioned, we are going to be starting the Industrial Revolution. I guess we already started it with you guys watching that video on last week. So the guiding questions, what were the factors that allowed the Industrial Revolution to occur in England? And in there we'll talk about what allowed the Industrial Revolution to start and relating that to why England had the kind of the best setup to allow it to happen in there. Then we'll talk about what the Industrial Revolution is. And I highlighted there in green the REV, sorry. That way if you see that for the future, you know that that's Industrial Revolution. I'm getting a little lazy and didn't want to keep typing it out. Then the third guiding question for the first part of the Industrial Revolution is what were the immediate impacts of the Industrial Revolution? So
short term. We're going to get to the long term later on this unit. All right, so just to give you some context, before anything happened in England, this was kind of a normal scene in the countryside. The community lived on the hill in the back of the photo. This was common owned land. Everyone would come out and farm. They would farm together, and they were into subsistence farming, which meant that they would farm just as much as they needed to make it through the winter, not for profit, just to live on.
With a big emphasis of community and helping out the community, right?
Yep.
All right, so that's what life was like in England prior to, and just to kind of leave that picture up running. And then we have this enclosure, what they refer to as the enclosure movement, which is the barons or the nobles, the upper class, taking this portion of the land and beginning to use it for themselves to farm, right? So in this image on the left, it's the typical England before the enclosure. So you have all these different colors of people who own different parts of the farmland. And then after the enclosure, we now only see three colors. So the lower class people, or these small farmers, they have all now lost their farmland.
And the common land is gone too, that we saw in the picture.
Correct. Then with the enclosure movement, we have this, along with the enclosure movement is the agricultural revolution, and the reference here is the crop rotation. So the crop rotation is the idea that we will plant wheat and barley in these two fields 1 year, and then the following year we will plant clover and turnips. And the idea here is that these two use up a lot of the nutrients. These two things replenish the nutrients. So by using the farmland this way, you're able to continuously grow food without diminishing the nutrients of the soil.
Yeah, in the previous system before this, they would actually let, I think, about 33% of their fields just lay fallow and not use at all. So this was a huge food boost, which ended up being a huge population boost. One thing that I just want to add really quick before Mr. Armstrong continues is that previous picture that we saw with the common owned lands and everyone was just subsistence farming. There's no reason to tinker around or to invent new ways of farming. Now that they're doing it as a business with these huge tracts of land, they're starting to mess around and tinker with their farming, and they're starting to come into a whole bunch of inventions.
Yeah, and there's less risk with it now too, right? Because you have enough food to where if one of these fields happens to fail on this year, you still have the other three to provide you with enough food. All right, so the factors of production, which is a leading factor as to why the Industrial Revolution was able to start in England, and I'll let Mr. Williams start here.
Yep, first off is land, and England is very rich with natural resources, coal and iron ore specifically, and it also has a great river system throughout, so that's great to transport all your goods throughout England. The next one is labor. Because of the agricultural revolution, people are now being forced to the cities, and you have a huge labor force ready to work. And the last one is capital. That's the last factor of production. It means that there are entrepreneurs that have money that are ready to invest. And the great thing about England at this point is that they are very liberal, and they are a government that is willing to endorse these types of entrepreneurships and inventions. So it has a very favorable government.
Then the last one is the access to foreign markets. With them already having colonies in all different parts of the world, they have access to all the different resources that are out there, and they also have access to help trade and to increase the wealth of Britain.
Everything you see here in red represents people that you can sell your goods to.
And Britain obviously had a lot of it.
Yep. All right, so that's why it happened in England. And our next big question is, what is the Industrial Revolution? Well, just like before, we're going to have to give you some context here. The way it worked as far as how England made goods prior to the Industrial Revolution was the cottage system. And so that's when families would make textiles out of their homes with the spinning wheel and, the kids by the fire and everything like that out of their homes, which were called cottages in the countryside of England. And again, if you guys don't know what textiles are, there's pretty much anything made out of cloth, clothing, and blankets in particular. And this is what they would sell throughout the world when they had those foreign markets.
So this is along the same time period as that picture we saw at the very beginning, where you had people who were farming. You also had cottage system in place. And again, the idea was that it's a community and they're working together and kind of helping give the specialized labor what they're good at, doing that, and sharing that out with the community.
100%. And actually, when you went from town to town, they would have different specializations. Maybe this town that we're talking about imaginatively right now, maybe they make certain types of textiles, and the next town over, well, they're the ones who turn it these beautiful colors, and their specialty is dyeing. Okay, so then there's these inventions that come about that change the cottage system. You have the flying shuttle in the top left, you have the spinning jenny over here on the right, and you have the power loom in the left. And I think a combination of these three big inventions, and there's many more than just this, I was just trying to give you a quick hit list, is they basically change or end the cottage system, and now people are going to the cities where these machines are maybe powered by coal, or before that powered by water, and now there's this whole urbanization movement. So the cottage industry is soon to be over.
Just one little thing to add here. We have some videos that show how these things worked, and we'll have those in the supplemental resource folder for you to look at if you're interested.
I think the big thing is making textiles is two steps. One, you spool the thread, and the other one is you weave the thread. So then that's what we kind of see here with the right and what's at the bottom left.
And the textile industry was the first industry to be affected by the Industrial Revolution.
100%. Textiles drive all of this. So now we have a picture of the factory system. This is where people are working now, and they're not making the goods themselves. They're manning the machines that make the goods. And so where they used to work out of their homes, they're now in the cities and going to a designated place to work, punching in the clock and serving their time. I don't mean that in like a prison sense, but they're working.
And to kind of tie it back to that enclosure movement, when all that smaller pieces of land were being built up, people were moving into the city, and they were moving into the city to have these types of jobs to be able to provide for their family, just to kind of help tie that back to it.
Yep, this is where the jobs are. So now that we understand a little bit about what industry and what was going on, now we can actually define it. And a good definition for what is the Industrial Revolution, it's a rapid increase of machines and machine-made goods in England, 1760 to 1850. I simply like to think of it as machines replacing humans in the workforce, which we still see with automation and all that stuff in today's world still happening.
All right, so what were some of the short-term or the immediate impacts of the Industrial Revolution? Well, the first one we have is urbanization. So as you see here, in 1801, you've got 80,000 people who live in Liverpool. By 1861, you've got 444,000 people. That's a huge increase. And we talked about that, and you saw some of that in the video that we watched last week. Another is the factory system. This is kind of an example of what the factory would have looked like back in the day. And as you can see, these kids don't. This young man, assuming it's a young man, doesn't even have shoes on, which is a pretty scary thought. And that kind of piggies off of the poor working conditions that the factory system had created. And another image to help re-emphasize that is these two kids pulling the coal through this tiny little tunnel, right? And then we've got the living conditions within the city that are bad. You have these kids playing next to a dead horse in the middle of town. obviously not the best condition or best place you want to be. You have a increase of disease that is spread due to the unsanitary conditions.
And this was emphasized in the video on Friday that you guys watched.
Correct. And then we've got the last saying is mass goods. So now that goods are being produced much faster, much cheaper, more people can afford them. And maybe for the first time, you've got your average person who is able to enjoy some of these luxury items that only the wealthy could enjoy prior to.
Yep. And now we live, we're all in the United States where mass consumption is kind of our thing.
It definitely is. So coming soon with our next computer side chat is we will talk about how the factory system industrial revolution is utilizing this idea of laissez-faire, and we will see how well laissez-faire is able to withstand and handle the industrial revolution. So we'll see you next time.
See you next time.